Over the decades, society's definition of vulgarity has continually evolved, yet certain actresses from the past remain controversial even by today's standards. These 20 bold women defied convention so fiercely that they nearly shook the foundations of Hollywood itself. And when you reach number 11, prepare to be stunned. Mae West. In an era when women on screen were expected to speak demurely and dress with restraint, Mae West shattered those norms entirely. During the early 1930s, while most actresses conformed to societal expectations, West carved her own path, writing and starring in her own play, Diamond Lil, before moving into film where she donned tight satin gowns, spoke in a languid, provocative tone, and delivered lines laced with double entendres. Outraged parents groups and religious leaders warned that her comedic jabs would ruin public morals. Her films became a lightning rod for controversy and were used by the newly created Production Code Administration as justification for stricter Hollywood censorship. A radio station in Boston even pulled one of her sketches off the air for being too risque. But instead of backing down, West leaned into her infamy. She joked that censorship made her wealthy, since every backlash only attracted more curious viewers. Her audacity became her brand, but it also solidified her place as one of the most vulgar stars of her generation. Jean Harlow. Before Marilyn Monroe ever had her moment with that infamous white dress, Jean Harlow dazzled audiences in the 1930s with her icy platinum hair and sensual confidence. MGM kept her hair gleaming white and poured her into barely there silk gowns for films like Red-Headed Woman and Dinner at 8. Unlike her whispery successors, Harlow fired off lines in sharp street slang, calling her lovers suckers and her bosses big boy. A vocabulary that critics claimed belonged in alleyways, not in cinemas. Newsweek famously labeled her the girl who made sin shimmer. In Red-Headed Woman, she portrayed a secretary who seduces her married boss, assaults his wife, and charms nearly every man she meets, going as far as to lock a door and dramatically throw away the key. Although censors snipped away scenes, lines of fans still stretched down sidewalks, proving that controversy sells. When asked if she was offended by being called vulgar, Harlow laughed, replying, "Is that what they're calling it today? Yesterday it was something worse." Off-screen, she frequented nightclubs in backless gowns and sparked rumors, yet her co-stars often described her as kind and courteous between takes. That paradox, an on-screen siren with off-screen grace, captivated the public imagination. Her untimely death at 26 sealed her legend, irresistibly provocative and frozen in youth. Theda Bara. Turn the clock back to 1915, a time before sound and film, but not before scandal. Theda Bara, born Theodosia Goodman, was rebranded by studio marketers to embody exotic mystery. They even claimed her name was an anagram for Arab death. In her silent hit, A Fool There Was, she reclined sensually on a chaise lounge, eyes darkened with heavy coal, luring a married man into disgrace. An intertitle read, "Kiss Me, My Fool," words that stunned audiences unfamiliar with such commanding female desire. Posters draped her in snakeskins and leopard print, and religious groups labeled her screen presence satanic. While Bara herself was soft-spoken off-camera, studios staged elaborate photo shoots with occult symbols to cultivate her image. Some conservative towns refused to show her films, fearing backlash from their congregations, yet fans still traveled long distances to see her. Though most of her films have been lost to time, her intense gaze, exposed arms, and calculated wickedness birthed the term vamp, a label for women deemed dangerously seductive. By the early 1920s, her style faded as flappers took center stage, but every femme fatale that followed inherited something from Bara, a slow-burning stare and a whisper of danger. She proved that even in silence, suggestion could be a weapon, Marlene Dietrich. A swirl of smoke, a dim Berlin club, and a sultry voice. That was the introduction of Marlene Dietrich. Her rendition of Falling in Love Again dripped with sensuality. But when she arrived in Hollywood, she brought more than just a song. Decked out in tuxedos and top hats, Dietrich ignored every gender rule. In 1930s Morocco, she famously kissed another woman on the lips and tipped her hat to astonished male onlookers. Censors tried and failed to remove the scene. Later, in Shanghai Express, she slinked across the screen in an elaborate feathered gown, uttering lines that hinted at nights filled with passion. Reviewers and moralists labeled her immoral, and vulgar became shorthand for her gender-bending wardrobe. But Dietrich didn't flinch. "Clothes have no sex," she declared. Off-screen, she was known for hosting dinner parties where fine caviar was served alongside sailor songs, seamlessly blending highbrow and lowbrow tastes. During World War II, she took her defiance to the battlefield, performing in uniform for Allied soldiers. While some continued to call her indecent to troops in foxholes, she represented strength and defiance. Dietrich didn't just outlast her critics. She transformed vulgarity into a form of art. Jane Mansfield. If Marilyn Monroe was crafted as champagne, Jane Mansfield was pure pop, bubbly, over the top, and impossible to ignore. Arriving in Hollywood in the 1950s, Mansfield had an instinct for grabbing headlines. At one dinner event, she accidentally spilled out of her plunging dress, creating a media storm. Dubbed the Queen of Wardrobe Malfunctions, though the 1950s press preferred the term vulgar, Mansfield used every incident to fuel her fame. In The Girl Can't Help It, milk bottles literally exploded as she walked by, a not-so-subtle metaphor for her impact. British officials briefly banned her cabaret performances, and the Catholic Legion of Decency protested her film, Promises, Promises, for being the first mainstream movie to feature a nude major star. But Mansfield kept smiling through every scandal. She traveled with a heart-shaped bathtub and a tiny chihuahua named Galena Houdini, making sure reporters always had something to talk about. Behind the scenes, she was no airhead. She read classic philosophy and spoke 5 languages, baffling journalists who expected fluff. Still, critics couldn't shake the notion that she represented bad taste, largely due to her flesh-bearing gowns measured more in inches of skin than fabric. Her tragic death in a car accident in 1967 cut her story short, but her legacy, playful, provocative, and unapologetically campy, endures as a reminder that sometimes vulgar just means being too joyful for polite society. Hedy Lamarr. Long before she became a pioneer in wireless technology, Hedy Lamarr scandalized Europe in 1933 with her performance in Ecstasy. The film featured a skinny-dipping sequence and a suggestive portrayal of intimate pleasure, rare and taboo for its time. Though it predated her Hollywood fame, U.S. Customs nearly banned the film for obscenity. Vatican publications condemned it outright, branding it as vulgar art. When MGM introduced her to American audiences, studio boss Louis B. Mayer cautioned gossip columnists that while she may have starred in a risque European film, she would now behave like a proper lady. Yet Lamar's sensual allure never quite faded. Her roles in Algiers and Samson and Delilah exuded an irresistible, smoldering mystique. At parties, she was known for speaking candidly about love, science, and male arrogance, subjects that rattled the sensibilities of 1940s America. During World War II, she co-invented frequency-hopping technology, the foundation for today's Bluetooth, but the press preferred to ask her about romance. Lamarr once joked, "Any girl can be glamorous. All she has to do is stand still and look stupid." Her life was a contradiction, brilliant, sensual, and misunderstood, but her influence endures in both tech labs and cinematic history. Betty Page. The contradiction was striking. She was never unintelligent, never lacking grace, and yet she could never quite shake the early label of being vulgar. Today, her legacy sits at a crossroads between brilliance and beauty, a symbol that reveals how often critics fixate on appearance while overlooking intellect. Betty Page, with her signature dark bangs, radiant smile, and that unforgettable leopard print bikini, embodied the quintessential 1950s pinup ideal. But it wasn't her playful calendar poses that caused the biggest uproar. It was the low-budget fetish films she starred in, filled with cheeky bondage imagery. During a 1957 Senate hearing on obscenity, excerpts were shown to lawmakers who clutched their pearls as Page cracked a whip and giggled innocently. The media called it filth corrupting America's youth. In truth, Page had simply responded to a casting call and treated the work as just another modeling assignment. Outside of the studio, she was baking cookies for neighbors and volunteering at her local church. This contrast baffled conservative moralists. After exiting the modeling scene, she faded into a quiet life marked by religious devotion and mental health battles. Forgotten by the mainstream, she re-emerged in the 1990s as a cult legend. To today's audience, her photos evoke strength and empowerment. To critics of her era, they screamed scandal. Page's journey reveals how much the meaning of vulgarity depends on context. What once provoked outrage in Congress now adorns coffee mugs and catwalks, with her bashful smile reminding us that controversy can cloak an unexpectedly gentle soul. Rita Hayworth, just a satin glove, a slow beat, and the smoldering rhythm of a sultry dance. Her performance in Gilda, 1946, remains a cinematic benchmark for seductive elegance. But when it first premiered, her glove removal drew protests. Hayworth removed exactly one glove, nothing more. Yet many declared it a suggestive striptease and called for censorship. Life magazine applauded the artistry, but parent groups labeled it indecent. Her World War II pinups, especially the famous photo of her in black lace lingerie, had already sparked controversy. Some military chaplains even claimed the images distracted soldiers and dampened morale. Behind the scenes, Hayworth, born Margarita Cancino, was introverted and dedicated, perfecting her dance routines until her shoes gave out. She confessed to disliking the love goddess identity, once famously saying, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me." Still, producers continually molded her roles around her curvaceous figure, cementing the idea that her body alone was provocative. Her later years, marked by difficult relationships and an early decline due to Alzheimer's, softened public opinion. Yet that single glove scene remains a powerful example of how little it takes for Hollywood to brand a woman with the scarlet word, vulgar. Clara Bow. The Jazz Age's ultimate rebel, Clara Bow, wasn't just called the It Girl. Some whispered a darker word behind her back: vulgar. Growing up in the tenements of Brooklyn, she brought raw energy and real-life slang to the silent screen, which jarred older generations still clinging to Victorian ideals. In the 1927 film It, she dives into a department store window in pursuit of a man, a move critics at the time saw as unladylike. Gossip columns obsessed over her nights at the Coconut Grove, wild Charleston dances, and supposed high-speed joyrides down Sunset Boulevard. Exaggerated headlines painted her as reckless with language, lovers, and cash. For moral watchdogs, she embodied the dangerous allure of flapper culture, especially when she appeared in swimsuits without stockings, a shocking image for the era. Yet her fans adored her. Women mimicked her bobbed haircut and free-spirited grin. When talkies took over, her heavy Brooklyn accent drew scorn, fueling rumors that the vulgar flapper was finished. She quietly left Hollywood for a ranch in Nevada, trading fame for horses and privacy. Decades later, film historians credited Bow with injecting modern vitality into cinema, proving that what critics once scorned as vulgarity was, in fact, the birth of screen authenticity. Marilyn Monroe, the image of delicate sensuality wrapped in silk and soft lighting. But behind the scenes, her public image was a battlefield between sensual artistry and accusations of bad taste. In 1951, she wore a skin-tight gold lame gown, so restrictive she could barely sit. Columnist Earl Wilson deemed her cheap and vulgar, sparking nationwide debate. Monroe cheekily responded by posing in a potato sack, joking that critics would find even burlap indecent if it clung to her curves. In Niagara, she played an adulterous wife. Her slow-motion walk almost got the scene cut for being immoral. In Some Like It Hot, her slinky beaded gowns outraged the Catholic Legion of Decency yet again. Still, Monroe balanced overt sensuality with a fragile vulnerability that made it hard to look away. She studied literature, read Dostoevsky, and took acting classes. Yet the press cared more about rumors of wardrobe mishaps. A sex symbol becomes a thing, and I just hate being a thing, she once lamented. Despite her efforts to be taken seriously, society labeled her anyway, a reminder of how swiftly autonomy can be recast as vulgarity when a woman owns her allure. Brigitte Bardot. Sun-drenched and effortlessly provocative, Brigitte Bardot lit up the screen in And God Created Woman, 1956, where she danced barefoot across sand and scandalized censors across continents. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned the film. U.S. mayors threatened bans. Variety labeled her vulgar repeatedly, while headlines dubbed her sex on a beach towel. Bardot, unfazed, said simply, "I am immaculate. I have nothing to hide." Off-screen, she tanned topless and ignored societal expectations, drawing relentless attention from paparazzi, desperate to capture more indecency. Her string of love affairs and resistance to conventional morality clashed with 1950s values. Still, her performances, particularly in Contempt, 1963, where she plays a woman enduring a dissolving marriage, carried emotional heft. In the 1970s, Bardot walked away from the spotlight to focus on animal activism. The same rebellious fire that once drew scandal was redirected into her advocacy. Once the face of liberated vulgarity, she became a crusader for voiceless creatures, proving that what once seemed indecent was, in truth, the mark of a woman unafraid to live by her own terms. Raquel Welch. A single photograph was all it took. Raquel Welch in a fur bikini for 1 million years BC, 1966. And teenage walls everywhere had a new pinup. Critics followed with less admiration, some labeling it prehistoric vulgarity. She followed up with Myra Breckinridge, 1970. A genre-defying satire that left Time magazine calling it a new low in taste. Its gender-bending themes and racy outfits made headlines. And though Welch didn't write the script, she absorbed the blame. Earlier, her entrance scene in Lady in Cement, soaked from a dive, led critic Roger Ebert to note its vulgar exercises in cleavage. But Welch pushed back against the double standards. "If male heroes can bear chests, I can bear shoulders." She fought for comedic and dramatic roles and earned acclaim in The Three Musketeers with her comedic timing and swordplay. Even her 1980s fitness videos sparked complaints. They were deemed too provocative for morning television. Yet with time, her elegance and philanthropy reframed her legacy. She wasn't just a bombshell. She was a force who wielded beauty as a tool for ambition, not titillation. Sharon Stone. When Sharon Stone crossed her legs in Basic Instinct, 1992, a media frenzy erupted. The interrogation scene became instant shorthand for cinematic shock. Editorials accused it of sleaze and gratuitous vulgarity. State censors even debated removing it. But Stone, fully aware of the scene's power, knew exactly what she was doing, turning the male gaze against itself. It wasn't just about exposure. It was about control. Yet the backlash was swift and intense, focusing on her body rather than her performance. Once again, a woman's choice to own her allure was met with the ancient charge: vulgar. In just a few moments, some theaters slapped adults-only warnings across posters, despite the movie's official R rating. At the center of the storm was Sharon Stone, then an unfamiliar name to most. Rather than fielding questions about suspense or story arcs, she found herself justifying the morality of her choices. Stone defended the character as a multi-layered woman commanding a room of men, a reversal of Hollywood's long history of reducing women to objects. Regardless, the label clung to her. Later films like Sliver and Casino kept her daring image in the spotlight. But Stone began to shape a different legacy, advocating for brain injury awareness following her near-fatal cerebral hemorrhage. In interviews, she came across as sharp and self-aware, acknowledging that one bold cinematic move can shape an entire legacy, for better or worse. Her journey reflects the film industry's tendency to flatten female characters into stereotypes. Bold becomes indecent, mysterious becomes threatening. Still, Stone endured, showing that depth and perseverance outlast fleeting scandal. Elizabeth Berkley. When Showgirls hit theaters in 1995, Elizabeth Berkley was thrust into an unforgiving spotlight. Critics were scathing, branding the movie as garish, crude, even cinematic self-destruction. Fresh off her wholesome stint on Saved by the Bell, Berkley became a sudden symbol of overindulgent Hollywood. Senators even cited the film in debates on pornography regulations, despite its narrative about ambition and betrayal more than sensuality. Late-night shows mocked her, and casting directors turned away. Yet Berkley spoke openly about the artist's obligation to risk failure. Over time, Showgirls was reappraised as a cult favorite, its flamboyance now seen as intentional satire. Berkley reinvented herself through stage roles on Broadway and cabaret circuits, later launching workshops aimed at building confidence in young performers. Looking back, the word vulgar says more about the cultural battles of the 1990s than about Berkley herself. Her path is one of reinvention, proof that the industry may brand someone for life, only to later repackage that same story as ironic legend. Madonna. In 1993, Madonna, already a global icon, shocked audiences with her role in Body of Evidence, a steamy thriller drenched in wax, leather, and an NC-17 rating. The Motion Picture Association flagged it for overt sexual content, while the media cried foul, accusing her of dragging film into the gutter. But for Madonna, controversy was a recurring co-star. The year prior, her Sex Coffee Table book triggered boycotts and sold out shelves in equal measure. Meanwhile, her subtler performances in Desperately Seeking Susan and A League of Their Own received far less attention than the roles that dared to challenge societal norms. Madonna defended her choices as artistic explorations of power and desire, territory traditionally monopolized by men. In retrospect, the once shocking scenes seem tame compared to today's streaming content. Madonna remains a case study in how each generation hands off the baton of scandal, only for the next wave of women to shatter it entirely. Pamela Anderson. Clad in red and jogging through the surf, Pamela Anderson became a 1990s icon thanks to Baywatch. With golden hair trailing behind her and a rescue buoy in hand, she epitomized beachside fantasy. Critics mocked the show's slow-motion sequences as primetime vulgarity. Her film ventures like Barbed Wire and Raw Justice were panned as superficial, further fueling media ridicule. Still, Anderson leaned into her persona, noting that male action stars in swim trunks were never treated with the same disdain. Outside of entertainment, she passionately supported animal rights, addressing lawmakers in formal wear, not swimsuits. Yet the public persisted in distilling her into a single word: vulgar. Years later, her honest memoir cast light on childhood traumas and the way media warped her image. Anderson's story illustrates how vulgarity is often a projection forced onto women who dare to capitalize on desirability while championing important causes. Kim Basinger emerged from shadows and saxophones in 9½ Weeks, 1986. capturing attention in a jazz-fueled erotic drama that had audiences debating whether it was art or something more prurient. Basinger described it as an emotional opera, but critics dismissed it as soft-core spectacle disguised as cinema. Churches cautioned parishioners, newspapers echoed accusations of vulgarity, and city councils discussed bans. Her earlier performances, where she often played sweet ingenues, stood in sharp contrast. Then came her shocking purchase of an entire Georgia town to develop a film production hub, a movie derided as absurd extravagance. Financial struggles followed, but she rebounded triumphantly with an Oscar-winning turn in LA Confidential, portraying a damaged yet elegant escort, channeling classic noir allure. That performance confirmed what critics had missed. Basinger possessed a versatility that transcended labels, proving that controversy doesn't preclude substance. Angelina Jolie long before global diplomacy and humanitarian causes defined her. Angelina Jolie captivated viewers with Original Sin in 2001. The film's moody love scenes drew ire, with critics dismissing it as indulgent and obscene, ignoring the intricate noir narrative underneath. Earlier interviews, where Jolie spoke candidly about her tattoos, blood vials, and fiery romances, fed a tabloid frenzy, eager to paint her as unhinged or indecent. But that same fearless intensity later propelled her into global advocacy, adopting children from war-torn regions and lobbying for displaced populations. Over time, Vulgar faded from headlines, replaced by words like visionary. Jolie's evolution highlights Hollywood's tendency to vilify what it doesn't understand, until that same daring becomes inspirational. What once scandalized now earns awards, proving that the industry's definitions are ever-shifting. Monica Bellucci. At the 2002 Cannes premiere of Irreversible, audience members walked out, visibly shaken. They called the film brutal, unwatchable, and vulgar. Monica Bellucci, who portrayed the victim of a devastating assault, defended the film's graphic intensity as a sobering commentary on violence. Critics zeroed in on one gut-wrenching sequence, ignoring the broader message. The vulgarity label stuck. But Bellucci's earlier work, whether in Milena or The Matrix Reloaded, showcased not only her screen presence, but her intellectual agility. Fluent in 3 languages, she quoted philosophers during interviews and often shattered the expectations cast upon her. Age has not dimmed her allure. Fashion houses still court her elegance. Today, Irreversible is reevaluated as a bold work of cinema, revealing that true vulgarity may lie in denial, not depiction. Bellucci's story asks viewers to consider who decides what's appropriate, and why some truths are punished with shame. Mamie Van Doren. Imagine a 1950s drive-in, headlights glowing beneath a starlit sky. On screen, Mamie Van Doren rocks and rolls in untamed youth, playing a rebellious teen sentenced to hard labor on a farm. The film was loud, flashy, and, according to reviewers, delightfully vulgar. Studios cast Mamie as a rival to Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield, instructing her to flaunt her curves at every opportunity. She obliged, donning tight sweaters and performing songs too risque for radio. Publicists gave her a gold convertible and told her to wave like she was kissing the crowd. Church leaders warned youth against her delinquent influence. Mamie laughed, saying, "Delinquent? I've never even gotten a parking ticket, just broke a few hearts." Off-screen, she entertained US troops with cleaner jokes than her screen persona suggested. Later, she joined projects examining censorship in the 1950s, embracing her past with a wink. Her tale underscores how yesterday's scandal becomes tomorrow's nostalgia. From the glint of silent-era snake bracelets to the slow-motion sprints of ocean lifeguards, these 20 women collectively demonstrate that the word vulgar often merely signals shifting lines between comfort and curiosity. As each of those lines moved, so too did the history of cinema. Whether through subtle defiance or overt provocation, These trailblazers staked new territory on Hollywood's ever-changing map, proving again and again that challenging the status quo is how legacies are made on the silver screen.